Coach, in addition to Janai Broom, what other Auburn players should we look for in the matchup on Saturday?
There's 11 of them. And they play 11 guys, double-digit minutes. The starters back from last year is Broom, the big kid in the middle, Cardwell, um, Chad Baker, uh, left-handed 6'7" wing, um, Denver Jones, Mike Pegues. You want me to list them all? I mean, there's 11 of
Well, not you don't have to list all of them, but just their style of play, and you know Coach Pearl a long time. Just your respect for him.
them. Well, they create havoc because every possession is an opportunity to force a turnover. You you got to be really good on your baseline out of bounds execution, your sideline out of bounds execution, um, out of timeout execution. They'll play anywhere from 5 to 6, 7 different defenses. Um, they've got a first team All-American in Janai Broom, which means every game they play, um, they're probably going to be favored to win because they're going to have the best player on the floor just about every night. Um, and then, Bruce's teams are always hard to play against. Some teams are um, hard to prepare for, but easier to play against. And then there's some teams that are uh, um, uh, hard to prepare for, but they're really hard to play against too. I would say Bruce's teams are like that. And I've known Bruce Pearl for 30-some years, so good friend, good man. I think Bruce is one of those guys that's good for college basketball. Extremely, extremely bright. His opinions matter. Um, um, and he's just a good person. I mean, he's really, really a good guy.
Thank you, Chris. We'll go to Chris Baldwin with Paper City, Houston. Chris, please go ahead.
Hey, Kelvin. How does JVA look in practice, and how does his ability to move laterally and recover impact your defense?
Well, he just got back to practice yesterday. He got through practice okay. Um, JVR's strength is his athleticism, but also his wingspan and the way we use him on defense and our pick and roll coverages and his ability to, if you're consistently dedicating 2 people to the ball, that means that they have 4-on-3 at some point away from you. And the best way you can make 4-on-3, 4-on-4 is being able to recover. And the better athletically you are at that, better you can make the game 5-on-5. So we try to best our ability. Some nights we're better than others, obviously, to make teams uncomfortable with some of our defensive principles. And whether it's J1 or Javier or Big Said, JoJo, we teach all these guys to play a certain way, and they have certain responsibilities, and they do a good job of that.
Thank you, Chris. We'll go to Chancellor Johnson with KPRC TV. Chancellor, please go ahead.
Hey, Kelvin. Obviously, being in the Big 12, you guys see tough competition every single night. But what can an early test like this, so early in the season, do for a team?
It can only help, win or lose. I mean, somebody's going to lose the game. If it's us, we're going to try to use this as a tremendous learning opportunity. Look at Alabama's non-conference schedule and all the early losses they had last year. It's in football. Where you lose a game, you can't go to a playoff, and losing, If you're a coach, you understand. Now, other people may not, but I don't really worry about that very much. But playing these kind of teams expose you. We're going to find out how we handle things that we don't do. It's hard to assimilate certain teams in practice because they're so good at it. Auburn's that way with their pressure. After every made free throw, after every basket, every time you take the ball in bounds on the side or the baseline, they're going to try to turn you over. Now, we never see that, but we're going to see it Saturday night for the first time. And I'm curious and excited to see how our kids react to it. And if we struggle with it, then we're going to have to figure some things out, and hopefully we do better.
Thank you, Chancellor. We'll go back to Chris Baldwin. Go ahead, Chris.
Hey, Steve Kerr is trying to play a 12-man rotation in the NBA, and as you said, Auburn has a lot of guys. Is there an ideal number you think for college that makes for the best size rotation?
Well, it's hard to answer that question because you're asking the general question. The ideal rotation is whatever the head coach thinks.
Thank you, Chris. We'll go back to Chris Gardner, please. Chris, go ahead.
Coach, how much have your bigs like Sid and Javier improved in communicating on defense?
Well, that's the first thing that we teach them. Yeah, none of them are very good when we start. We have to start over with a lot of these kids, but communicating with our coverage calls. Like we made a bunch of mistakes the other night against Jackson State on dribble handoffs. If you think about defense, most people think about it in general terms. But defense specifically is defending multiple actions in a given possession. Now, an action can be defined as a middle pick and roll, a slot pick and roll, a side pick and roll, a pin down, a dribble handoff, cross screen, back screen, flare screen. They're all things that an offense will run against your defense. Now, you're not going to have your team prepared for 75 different actions, and there's probably that many. I'm not smart enough to figure them all out, but I'm sure there is. But the key to defending any action is the communication. And I know I've said this before, and for those of you to get bored with my analogies, you'll get over it. But I want you to think about an air traffic controller with 3 planes trying to land, but only 2 runways are open. You don't think communication is not important? They got better have a clear understanding and a line of communication with those pilots to make sure one of them continues to burn gas and the other one know which runways to land on and which direction to come into those runways. But our bigs going up to communicate to our guards on coverage calls, every area of the floor is a different call. Middle is a certain call. We define the sideline from the slot to the sideline. That area, that's a different call. Is he above the free throw line or is he below the free throw line as he goes to set the screen? That indicates a different call. So our bigs have to be really good air traffic controllers and how they communicate to the guards on what to do. So, but all these kids get better as they come in because they're all wonderful young men. Number one, and two, they all have great attitudes. If you have a great attitude, you can teach a lot of things. But one of the things I think we do a good job of teaching in this program is humility. When you have a good team, the first thing people's going to do is overreact. They'll start thinking you're better than you actually are. Never fails. Just like the other way. If you lose a game, then all of a sudden you're no good, and they overreact that way too. So one of the things that I preach to our kids when I talk to them is don't ever pay attention to people that want to give you compliments, because if you do, you're going to pay attention to the same people when they're tearing you down. It's better to ignore them both ways.
We'll go back to Chris Gardner. Chris, go ahead.
Coach, just what are your thoughts on going to the Salvation Army Boys and Girls event tomorrow for community service for the event?
I think it's a wonderful opportunity to remind our kids the importance of giving back to the community. Our fans do such a great job of supporting us, and this may not directly impact our fans, but it does directly impact people that's outside our world. We're not the chosen ones over here. We're just a basketball team with a bunch of kids that are trying to set themselves up to have productive lives. Our job as coaches is to assist them along the way, but also take opportunities like this to use this as a life lesson.
Thank you, Chris. We'll go to Chris Baldwin, please. Chris, go ahead.
Calvin, how does Miles Kelly and some of the shooting Auburn has added change their team?
Well, Auburn's always had good shooters. Miles Kelly kid. Uh, Damon Stoudemire is a good buddy of mine. So guys that I've known for a long time, I'll watch their games from time to time. But I remember watching Georgia Tech play last year, and this kid Miles Kelly played for Georgia Tech. And I remember thinking I didn't know who he was. I just was watching the game, watching Damien's team in case he were to call me about something. That I would have a working knowledge of his team a little bit. But the Kelly's kid stood out. He's a high level shooter. He's got really good size, 6'5", 6'6". And Bruce does a great job of giving him the ultimate green light. But that's a big part of their offense, and they can, when they turn you over, that usually doesn't result in always a dunk or a layup. A lot of times it's a three for guys like Kelly. So we got to be conscious of all their shooters, including Kelly.
We'll go to Rich Hollenberg with ESPN. Rich, please go ahead with your question for Coach.
Thank you, Jeff. Calvin, good to see you again. At
Hey,
this
Rich.
point, now,
Is that your house?
this is, yeah, don't get me started. I'm on the second floor. I'm not in my office. We
Jesus.
flooded during Hurricane Helene.
Your wife's an interior decorator, huh?
Yeah, she did the best she could. She's like, I don't want you to be a slob on your Zoom calls now.
Yeah, that looks like a museum in the background there, man. Is that a giant snail?
All smoke and mirrors, bro. All smoke and mirrors. We're digging out from back-to-back hurricanes. That's another story.
Yeah.
Given the situation last year going into the season, you were top 5 as you have been recently. What is different, if not better, about this team coming into this year as opposed to going into the start of last year?
Yeah, I don't really have an opinion on this team yet. It's just too early. We've played 2 SEC schools, and we've had a regular season game. So I've seen them against other opponents 3 times. I think we've gotten better each time out, but even after Saturday, I mean, I doubt I have an opinion then. We're going to play 20 Big 12 games, 20. If you look at some of our teams in the conference, look at their non-conference schedule, you can tell they're not worried about who they play because they got 20 games to solve all the net seeding problems. You don't have to play anybody in non-conference you don't want to. You got 20 conference games. Nobody cares about that. But we went the other way. We're going to play Auburn, a team that we can lose. We can win too, but we can lose. And we'll learn either way. Alabama, Notre Dame, could be Creighton, could be Oregon, could be Texas A&M, another team. We're going to play a team that's got, I think, 4 starters back in Butler who'll move up in the Big East. So Toledo, in their conference, Hofstra in their conference, all teams picked to do really good. So we're going to get tested every single night. But that's good for this team, and I, our local media do a great job of following our program, and they know so much about our team. But they've heard me say this a lot. Now we've been winning a lot of non-conference games, regardless of who we played. But some of those games we could have lost, and you just learn from them. But this team versus last year's team was we had to replace 4 major players from the year before. The number 25 pick Sasser, number 8 pick Jarris Walker, kid that transferred in Tremont Mark, and a kid that tragically passed away in Reggie Chaney. So last year's team was we were kind of in a cocoon, just trying to figure out how to get to our identity. Everybody's got one, but you'd like to dictate what it is. And it took a while to get there with that team. But they had a veteran point guard and a great leader. The 2 guys that I think are doing a good job with this team in their way is LJ and Jaywan. They've kind of accepted the leadership role. And I really, really do believe that character matters. You got to be a good person, man. And LJ and J1 are just such a great, great young men, and they have the respect of their teammates. And, eventually we want this to be a player-led program with each one of our teams. And I think we're headed that way with this group. We're not there yet. We're still growing. We got a brand new point guard. We've got some new guys coming off the bench. So we're still a work in progress, and will be all the way into December.
Thanks, Kelvin.
Thank you,
You
Rich.
betcha.
We've got time for a couple more questions. We'll go to Joseph Duarte from the Houston Chronicle. Joseph, please go ahead, sir.
Good morning, Kelvin.
Good morning, Joseph.
Kelvin, you pretty much answered my question. Well, I was going to go in the direction of scheduling, so let me go a different direction. You look at nationally, I think there's about 6 or 7 games in opening week that are, ranked versus ranked, and then you have some that go to Vegas and play the neutral site games. Good for college basketball when you see those type of matchups this earlier in the year.
Yeah, I think everybody realizes that losing or winning big non-conference games really doesn't hurt you. Houston and Auburn, if they stay healthy, both are going to be really good teams this year. The team that wins, we'll move on and hopefully get better. And the team that loses, will move on, hopefully get better. I just think that if you've got a good team, you should play accordingly. We first got here, I had people ask me about the schedule. And I said, we've never not played the right schedule. We play the exact right schedule every single year. And usually the net bears that out. We just don't throw a bunch of teams' names in the hat. Most people have no idea how good Hofstra is. They should have beat us a few years ago. We were lucky to win that game. And that team wound up being maybe the best team we've had, 22. Toledo, always in the finals of their conference tournament. Those teams challenge you. So we respectfully choose our teams accordingly. And we put together a great schedule this year. Last year's schedule was great for that team. This year's schedule is good for this team. Now, because of the quality of the schedule, you're probably going to get beat a few times, but I've learned never to overreact to that stuff either.
You've moved from Dickies previously to a couple games the last 2 years at Toyota. At the same time, you've got such a great thing at Fertitta Center. Do you still like to continue to play at least one that's not an MTE off campus? Whether it's locally or within the state or anything like that.
No, I would prefer to play these games at Fertitta, but these teams won't. I can't make them. People act like sometimes think scheduling is going to the grocery store. You know what? Let's have some chili tonight. Huh? Did we go kidney beans or not? Yeah, let's grab some kidney beans. Well, that's not how you schedule. You're going to have to ask them, will they come to your place? And their first response is, we'll play you, but it's got to be on neutral courts. And so that's why we do it. It's not a preference. If we want to play these games, that's where we got to go play them. Not many teams want to come to Fertitta non-conference, the level that we're at, because they don't have to. They don't have to. And for a lot of teams, it does you no good. Why would we want to go play at Houston when we can play this team at this site? And that's a good choice for them, maybe. But every school is going to do what's best for them. And most coaches, because they're coaches, probably have a working knowledge of how to schedule. I'm assuming they do. That's why they're good at it.
Thank you, Joseph. Last question of the day, we'll go to Chris Baldwin, please. Chris, please go ahead.
Kelvin, how have you seen Ramon Walker improved? Emmanuel is saying how much better, how he's sort of overmade his shot and how much better it looks.
Well, he's a hard worker. He's one of our weekend warriors. Weekend warriors are the guys that are up here in the off season on Saturday mornings, Sunday mornings, Saturday nights, Sunday nights. Damian Dotson was a weekend warrior. Wes Van Beck, Marcus Sasser, Quentin Grimes, Kyler Edwards, Ryan Elvin, Ramon Walker, Malik Wilson. All those guys have gotten better. When you have an opinion on something, don't ever put a period at the end of a young man's ability. Always make sure you have a comma. A comma means there's more to come. A period means this end of it. No, none of these kids have periods. This guy can't shoot, comma, unless he's willing to put in the hours and hours and hours it takes to get better. And then he did. Now you move the period over about 7 words, and now you got a complete sentence. But you don't complete sentences with these kids until you give them a chance to improve. And that's the beauty of our program is player development. Our kids develop.